Hello, welcome back to another Theory Thursday. Today we are talking about altered chords, specifically altered seventh chords. We're talking about dominant chords today. How do you build them? What do they mean? What do they do? All that stuff. I'm wearing my Casio 230 GA today. And I've got my gold tweed tie on today. That's what we're doing. As always, if you've been enjoying the theory videos, the tune videos, the just the music videos, all of it, a like and subscribe is always appreciated, but not necessary. It just keeps the channel going and the community growing. And I love doing this, and I want to keep doing it. So, I think that's it. Without further ado, altered seventh chords. Let's go. Okay, before we get into the specifics of altered seventh chords today, I thought it would be important just to give a broad definition of what an altered chord even is. And then at the second half of this video, we'll do some sound demonstrations and all that. So, altered chords replace at least one note from the diatonic scale with a neighboring pitch chromatically. So, in a broad sense, any chord that you're playing and you alter one of the notes, let's, for example, we use C, E, G, regular C triad. As soon as you change that G to a G sharp or a G flat, that would be a C altered chord. Now, that's the broad sense. Usually, when we talk about altered chords in music, most of the, especially in jazz, most of the time we're talking about dominant chords, seventh chords, okay? And that's what this is about, is why it's important in terms of seventh chords. Because when you hear the word altered, it usually means seventh chord with an altered fifth, altered ninth, 13th. Could be one, could be all of them. So we'll get into that. But that's the broad definition, is you take a chord and you alter at least one of the notes to move outside of the diatonic scale. So it's a chromatic neighboring pitch. Okay, so that's that. So let's get into what we're talking about today, altered seventh chords. So going with what we just talked about, the definition, an altered seventh chord is a seventh chord with at least one of its notes altered. The notes most likely to be altered are the fifth, the ninth, and then the 13th. Now, that's not to say those are the only notes you can alter, but they're the most common. Okay, you notice I skipped the seventh because the seventh is what makes it a dominant chord. I skipped the 11th, not because it can't be altered, but just because it's not common to do so. So there's no restriction on which notes can and can't be altered, but for specific uses, these are the most common and most used. So, sometimes it's necessary, especially when you're playing in a minor key. So, before I break the guitar out, let's think about this for a second. Let's say we're playing in the key of C, major. Okay, the 5 chord is a G7 chord, which is made up of a G, a B, a D, and an F. Now, all of those notes are in the C scale, right? They're in the key of C that we're playing. Now, if I wanted to create an extension on this chord, I could say, let's make it a G9. That would be a G, a B, and a D, and an A. An A is also in the key of C major, right? Let's say I wanted to play a G13, right? G, B, D, A, or G, B, D, F, A, and then the 13 would be an E, right? I skipped the 11. Usually it's there, but since we're on guitar, you only have so many fingers to work with. So the 13 would be an E, also in the key of C major, okay? So we've talked about extensions before. You stay in the key unless there's an alteration. Okay, so let's say we're playing in the key of C minor. Okay, C minor. we've got 3 flats, not like C major, which are no sharps and flats, right? The 5 chord of a C minor scale is still going to be G7. We're talking about G or C harmonic minor, right? Where it's a B natural, not a B flat, the raised 7th. C harmonic minor. So the 5 chord is a G7, just like it is in C major. So you can play that G7, and the listener is going to go, okay, this G7, it's pulling towards a C. It could be C minor, could be C major. It works both ways, a G7, because a G7 is built of a G, a B, a D, and an F. Now, all of those notes are in C major, but they're also in C minor. Okay, so that's why it works. So you can use it on both. If you're going towards a C major or you're going towards a C minor, it works with both. Okay, now the extensions are where it gets a little hairy. So let's say I wanted to play a G9. Now we know when we look at chord voicings and chord charts and chord fingerings, it's not restricted to whatever key you're playing in. A G7 is just a G7, no matter what key you're in. A G7 is always going to be G, B, D, F. Okay? So that means a G9 is always going to be G, B, D, F, A. A natural. Okay? That is a G9. It's a G dominant 7 chord with a 9 on top. Now, the problem is there's no A natural in the key of C minor. So once we get into these extensions on your dominant chord is where you're going to start running into problems. Now, I said we will play this, but we'll talk about this a little bit more. The listener is going to hear that A and think, okay, this has to be going to a C major. Now, obviously, they're not thinking that because how would they know? But when they hear it, the ear pulls G7 or G9 to a C major. Why? Because all of those notes you're using, you're creating that tension with the tritone, right? You have the B to F, the third to the flat 7 of a G chord, right? That's the G7 use, right? That's what you use it for, is to create tension. And the 9 is telling the listener, okay, this is the key of C major. Okay, so this is where altered 7th chords come in handy. So if you wanted to go to C minor, what you'd want to do is go G7, flat 9. So what would that look like? It'd be a G, a B, a D, an F, and an A flat. Now, all of a sudden, A flat is in the key of A or C minor. Not only that, but when you're playing that A flat, it's a leading tone to G, the G of the C minor. So you're just creating more leading tones. You're staying within the key you're playing in, and it sounds like it's supposed to be there. Now, the same is true for the 13s. If you're in the key of C major, and you want to play a G13, that's fine. It's G, B, D. I'll skip the 9 and 11 just for the sake of easiness. G, B, D, F is your G7. The 13 is an E, right? Key of C, that's fine. Now you're playing in this key of C minor. There is no E natural. There's an E flat, right? That's the third of a C minor chord. There needs to be an E flat in there. So what would you play? You'd play a G7 flat 13, which would be a G, a B, a D, an F, E flat. Okay, now that's great voice leading because it stays within the G flat or G7 flat 13 to a C minor. You can keep that E flat there because it's the flat 13 of a G7 chord, It's the third of a C minor chord. Okay, so that's a lot of talk. You're probably thinking, John, you can keep talking all you want. It's not going to mean anything unless we hear it. So let me grab my guitar and I'll show you. Okay, let's go. Okay, so let's stick with regular extensions first. So I'm going to play in C major. I'll play a little progression just to get your ear acclimated. Okay, so what I'm playing here is a G13. I've got an E on top here. And that goes great into a C major chord. Okay, now let's play a G9. I'll put an A on top. Sounds great, right? You're adding the A on top. That fits into the key. So let's say we're playing in the key of C minor, in which case the 2 chord would be a D half diminished. So there's a regular 13. It doesn't fit there. That sounds like we should be going to C major. But that's not where we want to go. Okay, so let's flat the 13 and see if that makes a difference. Made all the difference in the world, right? E natural, E flat. And that's all it takes is that altered tone to lead the listener where they're supposed to go. Okay, so that's a flat 13. Let's do the same thing with the 9. Okay, I'll play the major version first just to get your ear acclimated again. So C major. Okay, there's major. Now I'm going to go to C minor. I'm going to play the major version so you can hear how it doesn't quite fit. Okay. That makes my ear want to go here. So let's flat it. Let's do a flat 9. See if that fixes anything. Much better. Okay, so that flat 9, the A natural is a regular 9. A flat would be a flat 9, which is the leading tone down to G, the G of a C minor. So those are the most important, at least in my book, because I use them every day. Those are the most important altered chords that you can use. The most common ones I use, especially if you're in a minor key. Now, it's not to say you can't go back and forth. If you want to create an air of surprise for your listeners, you can switch back and forth. For example, if I'm playing in the key of C major, and I want to just build a little bit more tension, I can use a flat 13 to make the listener think, oh, we're going out of the key here, and then resolve back to C major. So let me do C major again, and instead of a regular 13, I'll play a flat 13 like I would for a minor C minor. Okay, so it does work both ways. You're just creating a little bit more tension, which is really what jazz music's all about, right? Tension and release. So having that E flat, which isn't in the key of C major, but it serves as a great leading tone up to the C natural that's in a C major chord. Okay, so let's do these one more time just so you can hear them. So I'll do major, C major, I'll do a 13 and a 9. Okay, so now I'll do C minor, and I'll do a flat 13 and a flat 9. That's the importance of altered chords. Now, we just did flat 13 and flat 9 here, but you can alter them the other way too. You can do sharp 13, sharp 9, sharp 5, flat 5s. These are just the ones I use most often. So I'll put up a little chart here of all the most commonly used ones. You can just think of it as extensions. If you're in a major key, then usually extensions you can keep in the key. You don't have to alter them at all. It's when you get to your minor keys, or even if you're in a major key but going to a minor chord and you're using secondary dominants, is when you want to use altered chords. For example, we'll stay in the key of C here, C major, but if I want to put a secondary dominant before I get to my D minor chord, so before that D minor chord, I can think, what's a secondary dominant? I can use an A7. That'll lead me to D minor. And since we're going to a minor, I'll use a flat 13. So how would that sound? I'll go C, and then I'll put A7 flat 13, which will lead me to D minor, which will lead me to G regular 13, which will lead me back home to C. So that's just the power of knowing your extensions and altered chords. Okay, now I'm done. That's enough information for today. Hopefully you'll learn something, and I'll see you for the next one.